This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to this session from ICEPOPS 2019 called Nobody Puts Copyright in the Corner. So my name is Claire Sewell and I am the Research Support Skills Coordinator at Cambridge University Libraries, and that means that I'm responsible for educating the not always willing library staff in the various areas of research support, including copyright. But how do you tell people what they don't want to know about something they want to know nothing about, especially when it's an area that's as complicated as copyright? This presentation is going to outline some of the different ways that we raise the copyright literacy level of our staff so that they don't, as with baby, put it in the corner for someone else to deal with. I think not knowing or not wanting to know about copyright is quite a common challenge across many different institutions. It's complicated, it's legal, and it can have really serious implications if we get it wrong in any way. People don't want to get involved in this and rather leave it to someone else with a dedicated responsibility. We don't have this person at Cambridge. We tried and they wouldn't actually give us the money. So that's one major challenge. But we also have a couple of other challenges which are a barrier to copyright literacy that are maybe slightly more unique to Cambridge. I teach research support skills, and that comes with a very specific set of expectations around copyright. Things like what it means to sign a copyright transfer agreement, using third-party materials in your thesis, and publishing your work. Not every librarian in Cambridge has the dedicated research support responsibilities in their job, and therefore they think, this isn't my problem. To them, copyright means things like how much can someone photocopy or what can I put on the VLE. They don't want to know about anything else, even if they all have contact with researchers at some point in their role. They just consider it somebody else's problem. Another problem is the sheer number of libraries we have in Cambridge. This screenshot shows just a selection of them. There are over 100 libraries which are part of or affiliated with the university in some way, each serving a slightly different audience, from undergraduates to postgraduates to staff through to private researchers. All these users have slightly different needs when it comes to copyright, which adds to the complication. With over 600 library staff across Cambridge, if we don't sort out the copyright literacy problem, then we're going to have a major issue. Another problem is how spread out these libraries are across Cambridge. What you see on the screen is actually one part of a much larger map. This doesn't even include all of the libraries. There are several small clusters of libraries, as you can see, but there's no one main area where all the libraries are centred. This makes it especially hard to gather everyone together and train, and even harder to make sure that we're delivering a consistent message to those that we support. The final major challenge for us is our IP policy. In contrast to a lot of institutions, students and employees actually retain the copyright to the work they produce. And it's actually a major attraction for researchers coming to Cambridge that they can do this. So it's something that we need to keep on top of. Retaining copyright is great for people coming to Cambridge, but it does come with an added level of responsibility. It means that we need to make sure that we educate people in what their rights are. In turn, this means that librarians as educators also have an increased responsibility to learn about copyright so that we can advise our users. We can't just stick our heads in the sand, as ultimately we're the ones that are responsible for telling them these things. I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation outlining some of the main methods that we use to educate Cambridge Library staff about copyright and how well they've worked for our admittedly quite complicated audience. Or you can just enjoy the sight of these two dolls going on a tour of Cambridge University Library, for which I got some very, very funny looks when I was taking these photos. So like all good universities, we started with the traditional web pages. They're great, they're really in depth, they cover every aspect of copyright from a sort of scholarly comms perspective, and they actually contain a lot of good information. But no one knows that because no one has ever read them. They are lawyer approved, and we have massive thanks to our lawyer for doing this, but they are therefore full of legalese and about 10, 18-page long essays on copyright, which no one is actually going to scroll through when they want to find information. So our answer to this was to take all of this useful information and make it into something pretty and easier to digest. The research support handy guides that we've created have really taken off, and some of the most popular titles have actually been focused on copyright in some aspect. These are short 4-page guides which are aimed at both librarians and researchers. So librarians are able to print them out and use them as self-educational materials or display them for students in their library. Because they're so short, we have to think really carefully about what to include in each one, which is a really good way for breaking down larger chunks of information and making sure that we only share the most important points. And that's really good for our training as well. Of course, we also offer a lot of traditional face-to-face training. Some of that is dedicated specifically to copyright, and some of it just touches on it in some way. Copyright runs throughout the entire research lifecycle, so it's fairly easy to make it part of lots of different training sessions in some way. But sometimes we do have to be a little bit sneaky in how we frame things around copyright. So it means different things to different people. And obviously with face-to-face training, it works best if you can attract as large an audience as possible. We have had situations before where we've advertised it as a copyright session for scholarly communication and only got like 3 people in the room. So we've advertised it as a more general copyright session, got a lot of people, but they sometimes felt a bit cheated that the content was perhaps not what they were expecting. So you do have to get the description right, although I do find if you mention copyright in some way, it will lure people in because it's something that everybody seems to want to know about. Even with the best of intentions, face-to-face training on copyright can be a little bit dull. So we took some inspiration from Roald Dahl and introduced an element of gamifications into our face-to-face sessions. We've run sessions on both Copyright the Card Game and the Publishing Trap, which are interactive games in themselves. But we also use smaller interactive activities like these Creative Commons cards in sessions where we display an image and tell people what we'd like to do with it and get them to put together their own license. This seems to work quite well as a way for people to translate theory into practice and kind of cement their learning that way. Because Cambridge librarians are so spread out around the city, it's really hard to get them all in the room for face-to-face training, and you end up having to run multiple sessions, which obviously takes a lot of time and effort. So we've channeled that effort into producing regular webinars. At the moment, we run one a month, and they cover a range of topics, but as with the face-to-face training, there's usually an element of copyright in there somewhere. Our actual dedicated copyright webinar was the second most popular one that we've run to date. And people tell me that they really like these sessions because they can listen to them from their desk or they can catch up with the recording afterwards at a more convenient time. There's a deliberate question mark at the end of the title for this slide. So we did try and set up kind of a community of practice around copyright by bringing all of our training materials together on a Moodle site and using that as a place for people to bring their copyright questions so we could see the kind of questions that were being asked and obviously share knowledge amongst different library staff. Unfortunately, this one didn't really work out as it kind of ended up being me posting stuff and talking to myself in a forum. I think people didn't really engage with it because for one thing, they just forgot it was there despite many reminders. And for another thing, they seem to just want to be told rather than actually contribute to the decisions themselves, at least at this stage of the process. So we can chalk this one up to experience, I think. It didn't quite work out as we'd hoped. We also dragged Cambridge into the 21st century when we did what everyone else has been doing for a long time and launched LibGuides. Now, it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this talk what you think of LibGuides as a tool. They are a tool that at the moment is widely used in Cambridge. So we wanted copyright to have a dedicated presence on there. We're planning to build up a series of copyright guides aimed at different audiences. The one on the screen is the copyright LibGuide specifically aimed at the research community. So as we move towards the ref and the fact that this was the audience we had the most information on already, we started with researchers. I suspect that more librarians at the moment use them than researchers do in order to help support their research community, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We plan on creating dedicated guides for both staff and students, and this is going to form the kind of the basis of an overall copyright web presence at some point in the future. We also have the rather snappily titled Cambridge University Libraries Copyright Group, which was launched in 2018 as a sort of cross-institutional group looking into the copyright needs of libraries. We offer a dedicated copyright help desk, which is the address you see there on the screen, where people, student staff or library staff can email questions, and then these are triaged and forwarded on to the most appropriate person to answer that particular query. Not only does this offer a better service as people aren't bounced around, they just email from their point of view one central desk and they get an answer, but it means that we can build up a bank of frequently asked questions and see what kind of questions we are actually getting on copyright, rather than these being lost in the inboxes of various different individuals. And we can use these to help inform training initiatives in the future. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we have done so far, but what about what we're going to do? Although the webinars are quite good at attracting a wider and a different audience, we still get a lot of people who can't attend live at the time it's scheduled and then find it hard to make time to watch the recordings or simply forget that they're there. I've seen podcasts coming up at a lot of events recently, so that strikes me as a really good way to share information so people can listen on the go or whilst they're doing something else. So we've started to experiment with them. At the moment, they're kind of tied in with the webinars, and therefore the topic is the same as the webinar rather than being different. And there are also some shorter episodes, but there is, as I've said before, a lot of copyright content in there. Hopefully this will go down well, but time will tell. We're also in the process of moving our in-house training, the Research Support Ambassador Programme, to a fully open online programme, which we're aiming to launch in October 2019 as part of Open Access Week. This is going to be a self-paced introductory course to the basics of scholarly communication intended for library staff, and it does include, as you see on the screen, a dedicated copyright module. So each module can be taken on its own, or you can complete the whole programme, go through from start to finish, dip in and out, entirely up to you how you use it. But this is kind of a sneak preview of what it's going to look like. So I just want to wrap up with a few tips and tricks that we picked up when teaching copyright to reluctant librarians. Try and make it fun. We all know that copyright can be a bit of a dry topic, but a lot of events like Ice Pops and show us that you can actually make it fun and make it interesting and entertaining for people. I think the point I really want to make is that you don't have to put something really complicated together to make it fun. Those little Creative Commons cards, little rainbow color cards, are really simple, really quick to do. It takes 10 minutes of a longer session, but it really works well at engaging people. It's also quite helpful if you let your students, so in this case librarians, direct the content of the training, because it helps them feel more invested in it. We've tried to do this for them, to direct them a certain way, and it's been a bit of a struggle because people have pushed back a little bit and not been quite keen. But if they are given a chance to bring their questions to us and tell us what they want and we respond to that, whether that is through a format like webinars or podcasts, or whether that's through the actual content of the presentation, then it really works at engaging them and therefore increasing their confidence levels. If that all fails, you might have to use some stealth. So you can introduce copyright into wider training sessions. So for example, we'll be talking about publishing and then start talking a little bit about Creative Commons licenses, and hopefully the message will start to get through that this isn't scary and people actually know more than they think. However, if all of that fails, you might have to hit them over the head with it quite hard a couple of times. You might find that your audience is quite hard to convince, but with the right approach, you can get there in the end, and you need to kind of your own balance between subtlety of sneaking copyright into various training initiatives and just kind of brute force of saying you really need to know this and I'm going to tell you in the least scary way possible. So going back to my original metaphor, just like Baby in Dirty Dancing, nobody should be putting copyright in the corner. Yes, it can be scary. Yes, it can be frightening, but it's important that we develop a certain level of copyright literacy that's appropriate for us. Like our local audience in Cambridge, you might find that you know more about it than you think you do. And when people start coming to you with questions that you can actually answer, it does feel like doing the lift at the end of the movie. We do know about copyright and we can do it. Thank you.